So yesterday was the first day of us getting tough at the borders at Heathrow. People coming in from 33 countries on the red list were taken off to hotels, and they've got to stay there for 11 nights. Now, some of this was a bit of a farce because, of course, the passengers from all different flights were mixing, queuing up for passport and in the airport terminal. But you could say we're getting tough on our borders, and perhaps we should have done it a year ago. We might have stopped as much virus getting into the country. But I tell you something, if you really think this government is getting tough on borders and getting tough on who can come into this country, just think about a few other little news stories this week that perhaps haven't caught your attention. Let's start with Yasser al-Siri. Now, this guy's absolutely charming. He is a convicted terrorist. He says that it's actually the duty of Muslims to pursue violent jihad. Now, the Home Office want to deport him, and yet he's fought court case after court case. It's cost the taxpayer £2 million. And this week, the appeal court have decided that this man, despite his views, despite the danger that he represents, this man will be allowed to stay in the United Kingdom as a refugee. We can't deport him because of, yes, you guessed it, it's the Human Rights Act, the European Convention on Human Rights. Or we could go to a man called Dosku, Dini Dosku. He's 35 years old and he lives in Orpington, so all very cosy, you might think. Well, he this week has been convicted to 7 years in prison for running quite a sophisticated cocaine delivery operation. But here's the point. This Albanian has been deported 3 times from this country, has come back every time. He was released from prison in 2014 on the released early, of course, on the understanding that he would go back to Albania and never come into our country. And time and again, he's able to come back in and set up his drug supply operation gangs. I mean, what are we doing at our borders? How can we allow people who've been deported to come back here on 3 separate occasions? And I know that if you're flying into the country at the moment, even from one of the non-red list countries, or you're leaving, you're driving out through the Channel Tunnel for argument's sake, you've got to have a COVID test certificate and all the rest of it. And yet, reports have come to me from ferry companies in the last 2 weeks that van loads of people are coming into the United Kingdom, 10, 12 at a time, some coming from EU countries, quite a lot coming from Romania, but there are others coming from non-EU countries, vans full of people with kids, with dogs. Whether the ferry companies are actually doing sufficient checks, I don't know. Quite why these numbers are coming in right now, I haven't yet got to the bottom of, but it does seem to me to be part of the laxitude of the whole thing. Now, last week we talked about Napier Barracks, and I've been there and done a video. Unbelievably, today, in court, there are 6 people who entered the United Kingdom illegally by boat, have gone to court this morning. And their argument is that Napier Barracks must not house illegal migrants, asylum seekers, because the conditions aren't good enough and aren't up to scratch with the European Convention on Human Rights. I mean, it almost beggars belief, but that is going on in court today. And you can bet your life that the next time we get a spell of calm weather, the dinghies will start crossing the channel again, and not a single person will be turned around and sent back. And here's the problem. Yes, we've got Brexit, and I'm delighted about that. But when the Prime Minister tells us we've taken back control of our borders, well, only up to a point, because what we haven't left the European Convention on Human Rights, which was put into law by the Human Rights Act. We're still subject to judgments from that European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. And that is damaging our ability to get rid of dangerous people, including terrorists, from our country, making it very, very hard for us to send people back across the Channel to France, which, of course, unless you hadn't noticed, is a safe country. So there's no reason why anybody should come here and claim refugee status from France. We are hamstrung, and it doesn't matter how loudly Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, proclaims that she wants to get tough. She wants to do these things. We have got to have a debate about the European human rights regime. And you know something? This country doesn't need any lessons from Strasbourg or elsewhere about liberty and about freedom. We've actually put together, over the years, the best and the fairest judicial system in the world. But because of human rights, it seems to me that the rights of bad people often are now superior to the rights of good people. And I know that no media organisation is campaigning on this subject. And I know that most MPs, if you write to them about it, will do their best to try to ignore you. But just think about that little series of stories this week showing our total level of impotence. We need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, and then Brexit will be complete, and then we will be actually genuinely in charge of our borders and who can come and live, work, and settle in our country.